but I think my gifts, or I think my purpose is to care for people. How in the world do you do that in HR?
Yeah. There's this tension sometimes where it's like, I gotta know my exact spiritual gift.
And if you open yourself up to maybe hear what someone is saying, you might turn that corner and see your true gift.
That was a time you used that in youth, but you probably would have stayed in that area using that gifting if without that. My name's Aaron, and I have Barb here today, and we're going to talk about this last weekend's message. And we are in a series right now we're calling At the Movies, and we looked at like a movie, Transformers, kind of a unique movie, but we looked at Transformers to talk more about the concept of spiritual gifts. So I'm going to talk to Barb a little bit about like finding her own spiritual gift and her gifting, and then also part of your role at work is even helping others find their gifting too. So we're going to kind of just go off on a few different questions and tangents, but I thought to get us started, would you just introduce yourself a little bit for us?
Sure. So I'm Barb Van Egtern. I'm married to Byron, and we're high school sweethearts. Have been married for about 38 years. I think I always ask him. I always say I have 4 wonderful children, 2 of which I gave birth to. The other 2 are the ones that I gave birth to, the ones they chose to spend the rest of their life with.
It's a win.
Yeah, it is a win. I have a great family.
Yeah. Awesome. And you're expecting too?
Yeah, expecting baby number 4.
Yeah, awesome. It's super exciting. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this last series we talked about is all about movies. And I thought for fun we could just go off of like, what's your favorite movie? Do you have like one that comes to mind?
You know, when you asked that, it was kind of funny because I am from that age where it's Grease, Dirty Dancing, Sweet Home Alabama. But now I have to say I love the Chosen shows. My God. I can watch them over and over and over and learn something different every time.
So you went from Grease
to
The Chosen.
I like to think Dirty Dancing to
exactly.
Chosen, yeah.
So, well, someone was making fun of me actually this last Sunday. Like I was late to do our run through, and they were like, all right, I'm going to pretend to be Aaron, and we're talking about Dirty Dancing. I'm like, I am not doing Dirty Dancing. But awesome. I don't know what my favorite movie would be. I'm like so in like the time right now where we don't watch a ton of movies. We watch more children's movies. So we did just see Inside Out 2, and I really enjoyed it. It was like a very cute movie. This upcoming week, I'm talking on the movie Twisters, so we're going to see that one. I'm excited about.
There's some good children's movies. Moana has a really good story behind it.
Oh, absolutely. There's some very cool line. And then when your kids are into it and you're seeing how they're identifying, that's where it's super fun. All right, so again, I mentioned we talked about the Transformers movie this past weekend. And the reason we talked about it is it had a few statements in like the trailer that aligned with scripture or what the Bible says. And the first one was kind of all about how like these bots, Optimus Prime, and I don't actually even know the other one's name, but these bots, like they're just like lowly workers is kind of how they saw themselves. Feeling purposeless or just unable to do the big things like transform into amazing things that are doing purposeful stuff in their minds. Have you ever felt like that before? Like, have you ever felt like, I just, like, I'm lowly, or, you know, I don't have a purpose, and why do you think, like, we as people, like, tend to go through that at times?
Yeah, actually, I did, and it brought back a memory. When Byron and I were first married, I was a CNA, and I loved it, and I thought that was my gift, and I thought that was my purpose in life, because I loved to take care of people, but there was that.
Yeah.
You just wanted more. You felt like in a frump or something. Yeah. And I remember Byron saying to me, you've got more. You've got so much more inside of you, and you need to trust it. And it was right at that time when a position was coming open in HR. And I really struggled with, but I think my gifts, or I think my purpose is to care for people. How in the world do you do that in HR? And but I figured it out, but it was a different road that God led me on, and so I was there, but I was thankful I didn't stay there real long.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes like getting to that lowly state reminds you typically of like that there is purpose.
Yeah.
You know, like because when you feel this, I mentioned this I think even on Sunday, like when you feel a sense that like I have purposelessness, it's almost like the sign telling you you do have a purpose. You know, and like that's like the sign of like God wants to do more with you. And so, and there's also a tension too, where I think it's important to not, like some jobs, like you can find purpose, I think, in anything. And I think that's important to like remind yourself. It's like sometimes like I'm doing this task because it helps execute to the greater vision of things too. So I think all of that said, it's like really important to continue to know that you are made with purpose and to live that way. Well, okay, so as we saw in the movie, they were figuring out like they do have a purpose, you know, and like they do have like they get this gifting, so to speak. Do you believe like people today receive gifting from God? Like, do you think that's like something like would God give them a spiritual gift? I talked a little bit about this. I kind of clued in on that, but like, do you think people receive a gifting? How do they figure that all out?
I definitely think
Okay.
that that's interesting because when I went into HR, I did orientation.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've said to hundreds of people at the hospital is one of my favorite verses is 1 Peter 4:10.
Yeah.
And it says each one of us has received a special gift. And I would say to all the new employees, they're there. You have them. You just need to now use them to serve others. So yeah, I definitely think spiritual gifts are there. I think, you know, the fruits of the Spirit certainly is the first.
Yeah.
And then through that, you find where those spiritual gifts lay.
Sure. Yeah, I think people like there's this tension sometimes where it's like I gotta know my exact spiritual gift and like I really hit on this and maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit for our conversation, but it's like I think getting out there and like living out what you feel God is like tugging you towards is so important. And then in that you start to discover like I am really good at caring and I can continue to keep doing more of this, you know, in this this new area, and you kind of keep evolving that to ultimately, I think, discover this gifting that God's given you. But it's like chasing after the things that give you this fulfillment,
Right.
and I think going after it is huge.
And you talk about that. You've talked about it in your own life where you started as a teacher.
Yeah.
And look how, you know, that was turned around too. Yeah, I certainly, I think the chasing after is exactly right.
Yeah.
Where you find the joy, where you're glorifying God, where, you know, you feel that
All that.
fulfillment.
Absolutely. And I think that's an indicator of like I'm getting closer to finding the spiritual gifting. That was one of my favorite parts about like the studying I did for this week's message. It's like if you really want to find what God has designed you for and set you towards, you should look for like where you feel He spiritually gifted you, because it's like this like sign of like I am living out what God is wanting me to do on this earth. I think that's so powerful. Like, so, okay. For you, like, how do you think God's gifted you? Like, how do you think like He has kind of planted you on this earth to do, and how did you get to that discovery?
Yeah. I'm 60, you know, it's taken me a while, but I've always kind of known, I know where I feel that joy.
Yeah.
And that was in the compassion and caring for people. But then it kind of turned more into teaching. And I love just teaching and talking to people about God or about what's going on in their own lives, and or being a shepherd. You know, I think you said that once too. I think that's where my spiritual gifts are now. They lead down different paths.
Yeah.
But it all comes back to really teaching, shepherding. Yeah.
I love that. And like, would you say you learn that through doing almost more so? Like
Right.
the teaching was maybe something you wouldn't have done 30 years ago.
No.
But
No.
like,
I wasn't prepared. I didn't have the wisdom. I didn't have the knowledge. I mean, I probably did, but I needed to go through a period of my life to get there.
wow, I like hearing that, because it's almost like God's gifted you with these gifts, but like it still gets to a point where you need to kind of encompass all of this together, your talents, your skills, but then also the spiritual gifting, and then when they come together, that's powerful. Okay. Did you have any big flops?
Oh, yeah.
Like failures along the way?
Yeah.
Like of like, I think this is my gifting, or or even trying to do your gifting. Like, because in the movie we showed, like, there's this times they've been gifted, but then it's like, oh, it didn't go well when we tried to use them actually.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, actually, Byron and I were youth leaders for many years, and I've always, you sometimes go home, you feel good about what you talked about, and sometimes you don't. But there was this one time where I really felt that the Holy Spirit was on fire.
Yeah.
It was such a cool lesson, and I'll never forget it. It was on the truths of the Bible, the truths of the world and the truths of the Bible. So it was a real conversation with these senior hires. And I walked out of there going, way to go, God, you did it, And then the next day I'm in my office, and 2 parents came to see me and was not impressed at all with what we talked about. And that I really allowed, I kind of like to call it my false identity. I started questioning myself, saying, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. I have no reason to be doing this. And it got so bad that I actually quit. And so but God took that and said, okay, girlfriend, maybe it's time for you to leave here, but now you're going here. Yeah. And so then Byron and I went into the jail ministry, which was totally different, but I think it's what needed to happen. Yeah. But I let those voices tell me things that really weren't true.
Yeah. Well, I think that's super interesting, because you were gifted. I would say God's gifted you as like a teacher or a shepherd, is kind of like what we talked about. And so that was a time you used that in youth, but you probably would have stayed in that area using that gifting without that struggle, without that turmoil. And so it's like almost a way like God kind of steers at times to get you like, no, you're in sync. You're using your gifting. It's amazing. But like, I want your gifting here. Yep. And sometimes I think we go through stuff like that where it's like, this isn't for me, like, but this is, and I know I'm good at this or whatever. Yeah.
And it brought me to Centerpoint. It brought us to it brought our family to Centerpoint. Yeah. So when you look back, you can see it, but when you're in the middle of it,
it's tough.
Yeah.
It still hurts.
Right.
I could think like we could share youth stories all day, but I went through times where like even just like different teachings I did in youth or events I hosted, and like a kid showed up, like I had
or a kid ran away.
Yeah. Stuff like that where it's like, am I equipped for this?
Yeah.
Like, and I've gone through, like, to get kind of real, like I've gone through doubts even where I'm like, leading is really hard. Being a leader, I think, is really hard. And so it's one of those at times where like I don't know what to do. And then I start like funneling in on myself of thinking like, I don't know if I'm a leader. I don't know if I can do this anymore, because I don't know what to do. And like what I've learned along the way, it's like a leader is just like everybody else. They don't typically know what to do, but they are using what they have to kind of make decisions because they know something has to be made. Right. And so that's one where I've really kind of filled in that void. Right. But there are times where I've led and I'm like, I totally flopped here. Like, am I a leader? Like, can I do this? Can I make this decision? And it's like, that's just part of the journey, is what I've learned along the way.
Yeah. And bring it to even parenting. We don't know how to parent.
Yeah.
You just do what you can do.
Do what you can do. Each kid is different.
Each kid is different.
You think you have it figured out, and then not so much. But all right, so your job, you work at the hospital, and you're someone who leads hundreds. We said almost 500 volunteers. Wow. and you're kind of ultimately helping them like discover their talents or gifts. So like when you're doing that, like what do you look for in them? Like how do you figure out like what they're gifted in and what they're not, and how do you tend to know if like that person is working in their gifting, and then maybe even how do you get them to kind of go towards where maybe you're seeing them feel gifted?
So it's easy in volunteer services, believe it or not. Because when I hire for a position, I'm hiring for you to file or clean or whatever, nursing. That's a specific job duty.
Yeah.
But when volunteers come in, we sit down with them and we say, what's your vision? What did you see yourself doing here? When you start asking those questions, their gifts start coming out. They'll say, well, this is what I really enjoy.
Yeah.
And then we place them accordingly. We actually create new service areas because of their gifts. And there are times that, you think, oh, I think they'll be really good in this area. And then they get in there and you're like, no, they're not great in that area. And you just have that conversation with them and say, I see your gifts are leading me to believe that this is an area you'd be great at. Are you willing to try it?
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, they are, and they love it. The key is, if you think about volunteers, when you walk into the church or the hospital, they really love what they're doing, the majority of them. And it's because they're serving. They're doing what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think people tend to know what it is they're gifted at?
I don't know. I like to point it out to them, but I don't think everybody really understands that whole gifting piece.
Like, because that's a struggle. Like, I work with a lot of volunteers too, and so it's like there's times where like people have a vision for what they want, and then I'm like, and I never want to be the dream killer, but I'm like, I don't know how that's gonna work, but I see you so gifted in this area too. And so it's like, as a leader, I have to play that out. Sometimes it's like, maybe go for it, awesome, try it. But then if that's not the win for you, I want to help you find, 'cause I think this is your sweet spot. And I think like that is sometimes our calling as like shepherds or teachers is to help people find that.
Yep.
But I didn't know if you had any insight on like how do you like help some, like do you see that happening a lot or not? Or
I do, and I think that's where, like I said earlier, Byron was the one who led me to go down that other path. I think we need to trust sometimes what our community, what our church, or what people are saying to us, because they may lead you in that direction of that was always there. But remember, we listen to voices of the world a lot. And if you open yourself up to maybe hear what someone is saying, you might turn that corner and see your true gift.
I love
Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Do you think like finding our gifting, do you think that really does help us find our purpose in God? Like I mentioned that, like that was like a big moment for me in my studying this past week. It's like I feel like when I know what my gifting is, I now know how to be purposeful with my life for God. Do you believe that?
I do. The word purposeful kind of throws me a little bit, only because I like to believe that the gifts that are given to me are to continue to build his kingdom, right? I mean, that's what we use our gifts for, is to serve others. But ultimately, it's our purpose. It's why we're here. So I just looked at it a little differently, but I think we're on that right path. That's because it's going to lead you to your purpose. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so changing gears a little bit. I talked about like 3 different statements or whatever to help you kind of discover your gifting and then to kind of live it out, so to speak. So the ones were faith to acquire, courage to discover, and then obedience to purpose. So if we kind of just do each of these, just talk briefly for each of them. For the first one, like again, faith to acquire. Is faith in God hard for you? Like,
For the first few seconds, yeah. And I find that a real quick story. You remember that the rain we just had?
Yeah.
And it was just coming down, pouring over the road. I thought our pond was going to completely overflow.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my husband laying comfortably on the couch,
Yeah.
no worries on the world.
Yeah.
And I'm like, when are we going to seek higher ground?
Yeah.
And he goes, when are you going to have faith?
Yeah.
And I just went, and at that moment I realized I never reached out in prayer.
Yeah.
And so it's those first few seconds that you let fear overtake you.
Yeah.
But if I can bring myself back quick enough, my goal is to do it immediately and not to have that lag. But no, I think, faith is very important.
I think you're a champion of faith. Like I see, like we just were talking earlier, and like faith is just so like embodied in you. Like, and I know it's a choice. Like I know it's a choice you have to consistently make. But I think that is faith. Like when it's blind, or it's just like, oh, it's just easy. I think that everyone deals with making that conscious choice, but I see it in you very consistently. So then, like with that concept of like you have to have faith in God. That's how you receive a spiritual gift. But then it's like, okay, I know God's gifted me. I'm figuring it out. How do you have like faith in like, okay, I feel God has gifted me in this area, and I'm going to continue on. How do you keep on that? It's like in believing that this is the gifting from God. You know, like I'm not going to stop just because two parents came and like told me I'm not a teacher anymore. You know, like
communication and keeping your eyes open. I think communication with God is like every day I love to get up and go, okay, like even coming here, God, what is it that you want me to know? You know, what do I need to know about this conversation? What do I need to know about today? And then the constant staying on that track. Don't going off on your own. Don't believe the voices of the world, but staying focused on what we're here to do.
No, I think that's amazing. So it's like, I like to bring it back to like God, you know, like, and it's like you said, it's like for the first 2 seconds, you know, but like that to me is like how I stay in my gifting and like have faith in it. It's like, whoa. Right now I'm letting me take over, and it's like, I got to talk to God about this, you know, and like refocus on him. And I think that is huge. Because like I have shared like how that's how it resolves a lot of my anxiety. That's how it resolves a lot of my fear. You know, like all of that when you catch yourself like, I haven't gone to God with this and it's this grounding. And I think that's the same with a spiritual gift. It's like, I've been gifted to be a teacher, and sure, I'm maybe gonna have bad days, but I know God has gifted me this way. I've seen people be changed through this. You know, and it's like reminding yourself of what God has been able to do through you in that. So, I love that. All right. Second one, which was courage to discover. So you need to kind of have courage or be courageous to try different things and discover maybe how you've been gifted. Do you think God expects some level of courage from us to like actually discover our gifts that he's given? And what would you say to someone to encourage them to just try?
I heard something the other day that I really felt was profound. And, you know, when you don't have courage, there's fear, right? And fear is, I believe Satan puts fear in front of you first. But if you can get past that fear, on the other side is what's waiting for you. So you do need that courage to pass through. What I was listening to the other day, someone was talking about death and how a lot of people are fearful of death. So that's that enemy putting the fear there, but we all know what's after death.
On the other side.
So I think that's how I would explain it, is you're going to encounter those fears. You're going to encounter the people that are going to tell you you don't know what you're doing. You have to hear God's voice.
I like that. So helping them see that like you're going to have to combat this tension at some point, this barrier. And in order to really get to know what your gifting is, it's like you kind of got to go through it, not keep backtracking.
Right.
There's like a reel I saw the other day. You referenced like a radio station. I'm referencing reel or whatever, but where it was like how like the cows run from a storm where the buffalo goes through, and it's like once you get through, you're not in the storm anymore, but the cows are in the storm way longer. And it makes me think of, it's like, if you want to find your gifting, you got to go through the storm, you know, and you got to be in things, you got to wrestle with it, and then you'll discover it along that way, you know, and instead of being in this, I think this is it, you know, like, and
it's going to change, you know, like it's because like where I was talking about with the teens, I think God needed that to happen for me to take a different route. So it's not gonna, you're not gonna just get past and it's gonna be beautiful. It's there's gonna be other routes that He needs you to take.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, the third one is obedience to purpose. So being obedient to live out your gifting, to actually do your gifting. And that eventually gets to like being purposeful for God, you know, and using that. How do you continue to keep being obedient and showing up even when it's hard? You know, like some days you don't want to be a shepherd. Some days you don't want to be a teacher. How do you be obedient to continuing to do that? And what motivates you in feelings of times of just like purposelessness, of like, I'm done with this.
Yeah. I have to make sure there's no stinking thinking going on in my head.
Yeah, it's big. It's a big Barb statement.
It's a Joyce Myers statement. Okay. She's the one who said it, and it just kind of stuck with me. But I can't let the stinking thinking control my head.
Sure.
That would become very dangerous. So I get up in the morning. I have my morning time with God. I'm very blessed that Byron goes to work early in the morning. That gives me that time. That's what grounds me. And then throughout the day, I have to constantly stay on track, because you can get pulled in so many different directions. And I do. I'm not perfect. And there's a lot of times I come home and you're just like, you're exhausted and you're like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But you just keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep asking, what do you want me to know today? Why am I here?
Yeah. What I'm hearing you say even too, when you say the stinking thinking concept, it's like, you know what is positive, you know, like, you know, kind of like what would be a positive statement or thing to do. And so it's like, when you find yourself not doing the positive, you find, it's like, whoa, where is this coming from? You know, and I think like that's where it's like, I need to be obedient to God here. Even though I'm, you know, like, even though I'm going derailing because I'm crabby right now, or that person ticked me off, or whatever it is, but it's like, it's reflecting on like your mind and keeping it right, and to like what is true, what is honorable, like as Scripture talks about.
You gotta love it when your children redirect you. You know, mom, what's that all about? But we're human, right? We're gonna have those mistakes, but as long as we can figure out how to get back on track.
All right, I have two more questions for you. Okay. Can you share a time, like, because I think there's other people that are dealing with this. It's like they think they know their gift. They are trying to figure out, like, how to use it well. But, like, they're just feeling kind of purposeless still. What would you say to them? Like, can you share a time even, too, like, where maybe that you've wrestled with that? Or
Yeah, I wrestle with it a lot. Like I said, I'm not afraid of sharing my age. I'm 60 years old and I'm still going, okay, Lord, what is it that you want or need from me? I would say to keep asking the questions. Keep going to God. Keep asking the questions. He will answer you. But you have to be willing to listen and to listen to every single thing He's putting in front of you. If you know, it might be a Bible verse. It might be talking to you after church, or me after church, or it might be someone standing in line at McDonald's that just says something to you that kind of ignites you. And I believe those are messages from God. Keep asking. And keep seeking and searching. And then listening to your loved ones. What do they say? And then what are the lies you're believing about yourself? Because you got to get rid of that.
I love that, because I think that's like the beautiful picture of like what the church is. You know, it's not just a worship experience, a sermon. What it is it's it's that, but it's also the conversation with the greeter. It's the conversation with your family there. It's the thoughts that come afterwards. It's all of the people, the community coming together to kind of help you in your reflection and answers. And I think God speaks through all of those things. And so, yeah, I think that's absolutely like keep trying, keep showing up. And I'm sure you've gone through seasons where you've shown up and you haven't heard something for a while. Yeah. Yeah.
Dead silence.
Yeah. But it's that's where like this obedience of faith, where it's like, I know God will show up.
Right.
And I think, I mean, I'm not 60, but I think over the years you eventually start seeing like there are droughts.
Yep.
But he does show up. And I think that's like where it's really wise to have people like yourself who have gone through the journey longer than myself even, you know, where it's like I've seen God continue to show up, keep showing up. He's gonna respond.
I'll tell you, Aaron, it's easier at my age than it was at your age.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot that's rallying for your attention, and so I think it's easier the older you get. But hang in there. Just hang in there.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking some time and chatting with us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it was great.
It's always good.
All right, see ya.